So this is just a quick recording to go over the concepts visually that I talked about in my last few posts. You can write this video and haven't read those posts, you can find the links to them in the description below. So starting off with XRD, or composite resource definition, we have the one that talked about and gave examples of in the post. You can see we're defining a very simple schema here. The only field that we're collecting is ID. And as we talked about, when we create an XRD, then Crossplane machinery is going to create a CRD or a couple of CRDs depending on how we've configured it. So in this case, I have claim names available. And when we have claim names available, what we're saying is we want to create both the composite resource itself and the composite resource claim. And so we'll see two CRDs. And this CRD here, X Networks, will be cluster scoped. And the claim names network is going to be namespace scoped. And I'll show you that as well. Then we've got our composition. And this is where we can kind of tell Crossplane what we want to do when we create a composite resource. And in this case, as in the post and the examples, I'm creating three things in the Azure provider space. I'm going to create a resource group, I'm going to create a virtual network, and I'm going to create a subnet. And you can see I'm also providing some additional data here, a CIDR for the subnet, a service endpoint so that we can connect to other workloads on the subnet from other services like Azure DB, etc. And then finally, we've got the manifest that's going to create one of the XRs that we have defined over here. In this case, it's going to be a claim, because you can see I'm using the claim name, not the composite resource name. And this is the one simple thing I'm providing, and that ID there, spec.id, is being fed in via the XR to the composition, and then in my patching, I'm referring to it here, and then applying it to spots of my managed resource that I'm going to be creating. So one example here of a string manipulation is I'm using that spec ID with then a hyphen dash or hyphen SN for the subnet. And then up here, I'm doing hyphen VNet for the virtual network, etc. So you'll see that once the objects are created. Okay, so let's create some of these objects. First thing we'll do is create the XRD. And if I grab that with kubectl get, you're going to see a few more, because I've got some other projects I'm working on loaded at the same time with a lot of things that look or sound very similar to this, what I'm doing. But this is the one we just created. And you can see it's been around for 6 seconds. You see this last one down here from one of my other projects. It doesn't say offered true. This is because this particular composite resource definition does not offer a claim. So there's no claim name. You won't see true here. This is what this column is representing or indicating for us. Okay, we said that would create some CRDs. So let's see those. And I'll grep that so that we're not getting every CRD. And those are the two CRDs that we created. So you recall, this is our composite resource name. This is our claim name. And so the claim name should be namespace scoped, and the composite resource CRD should be cluster scoped. And we can find that too just by describing them. Also describe the claim name first. I have to tell it we're looking for a CRD here. And there it is. It's a namespaced resource. And so if we did the same for the composite resource instead of the claim, we should see cluster scope. And there's the cluster scope. So I just kind of to reinforce how those two types of objects get laid out into the Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so now we need to create our composition. So I'll do that. And the last thing that we need to do is to create our instance of that composite with a composite resource. First, we'll take a quick look over at our Azure portal. And I'm just filtering on my resource groups here so that we don't have to see all the resource groups in this test environment. When we start creating, we should see things populating here. So let's go ahead and create an instance and kick off the process. Okay, so if we take a look, sometimes this goes quick, sometimes Azure takes a little while. We'll see what happens. We can always go to our console and we can look for those managed resources that should be created by our composition and get their status. And here it looks like, okay, between the time I came back to here and submitted that command, it's created them. So the provider is backfilled in here and said that it's synced with Azure and the objects are ready. So then we go back to the Azure console, and this could be a filter issue. I don't know. No, there it is. So now it's created. It's a resource group that we defined, and you can see how the hyphen and the ID value that I provided in my manifest were string concatenated there. We've got our virtual network, and then within our virtual network, we'll find our subnet. You can see here the CIDR that we've set for that subnet, and then also that service endpoint that's defined. So that's sort of all the concepts put together in action. I would say one of the things that's different about Crossplane that isn't obvious from this demo is that we're running in a Kubernetes control loop pattern. And so we are not just implementing and creating infrastructure, we're also reconciling that against our intended state, which is stored in the Kubernetes API server. So let's show an example of that before I close out. Excuse me. I'm going to just change my subnet here, and this now is no longer the CIDR value that I have expressed in my state for this object. And so if I save this, in the next reconciliation loop, we should see that get reset back to a .1 network. Okay, so it's changed back now, and we've maintained the state and our intentions for this resource. That's it for now. I will post some more as I create more content.